Birmingham is in crisis. For 2 years, Birmingham City Council, Britain's second city, and the largest council in Europe, has been bankrupt.
The council saying, we've got no money, but that's not the citizens' fault. That's not their fault that our council is broke.
The city is in a very difficult situation, and I am concerned, and I'm generally quite fearful sometimes around where we are going to be in 5 years' time.
It's a complete mess.
Whilst scenes of rubbish piled along the streets are far rarer than they were in January or March, 6 months on, Birmingham's bin strike continues. And while these images made for exciting headlines, Birmingham's bin strike is only the most visible symptom of a city exhausted by crisis.
Although the immediate impact around waste is significant, I feel that there is a long-term uncertain future for the city.
If you've heard anything about Birmingham's bankruptcy, it's likely one of two stories.
14 years of austerity took £1 billion away from this city. Birmingham has not been alone in facing challenges created by austerity. This isn't just a red, blue or yellow issue. This is something that's affected all councils of all political persuasions.
So it's important to note, and it's incredibly frustrating, that cuts to Birmingham's budget centrally have nothing to do with Birmingham's crisis. It is entirely self-caused.
They run out of everyone's money, they've bankrupted Birmingham, and that is a snapshot of what will happen if Keir Starmer is in power and across the country.
Which is it? Is Birmingham's bankruptcy the result of Labour Council mismanagement or Tory austerity? Who's to blame for Birmingham's financial crisis? To find out, Chambers sat down with the council leadership and local government experts to understand how Birmingham got here and how it plans to get out. Things used to be different. The 19th century press called Birmingham the best governed city in the world. Dedicated to Victorian ideals of progress, Birmingham Council was founded in 1838 with a motto of a single word: forward. In 1875, to eliminate urban poverty, Mayor Joseph Chamberlain brought energy, water and slum housing under council control. Although initially derided by critics as socialism, Birmingham's council soon became the gold standard of local government. This activist council was sustained only by rapid economic growth, as industry swallowed up migrating labourers from Ireland and the north. Through the first half of the 20th century, Birmingham remained one of Britain's fastest growing cities. But there was a problem. Birmingham was growing too fast. As the rest of Britain began lagging behind Birmingham, beginning in 1945, Westminster began diverting resources away from the city. However, it seems that even the British government couldn't stop Birmingham, as after being bombed flat, the city roared back. Incomes grew rapidly, whilst relentless industrial growth swallowed up more and more workers, now increasingly from the Commonwealth. And then one day, Birmingham stopped growing. After years of underinvestment, Thatcherism annihilated Birmingham's industry. But since the 80s, things have changed.
You compare the damage to manufacturing industry in the 1980s, which hit Birmingham particularly strongly because of the makeup of their economy. I think it's done quite well.
In the following decades, council investments spurred redevelopment in the city centre, whilst HS2 promised to strengthen Birmingham's connection with London and Europe. When the 2022 Commonwealth Games began, many were starting to see Birmingham as a city which was quietly redefining itself. And then a year later, it was bankrupt. On the 5th of September 2023, Birmingham issued a Section 114 notice, reported in the media as an effective bankruptcy. The first thing to know about Birmingham's bankruptcy, however, is that it isn't one.
They issue these Section 114 notices, which popularly is called bankruptcy. Actually, it isn't really. It's saying that we might not be able to cover our liabilities this year.
Unlike a national government, a council can't really go bankrupt. If a council can't meet its debt obligations, it can't default.
In local governments, councils are required to balance the budgets every year, which, if you think about it, is a crazy rule. You wouldn't do that in businesses, you wouldn't do that in your personal life, but it's the requirement that we put on councils.
Birmingham had to pay its debts in full, no matter the cost. Since late 2023, Westminster-appointed commissioners have implemented far-reaching cuts and significant tax increases to repay the central government for Birmingham's bailout. The commissioners advised the council to sell $1.25 billion in assets, and perhaps most impactfully to daily life, ordered £300 million in cuts. To many, the impact of this has been nothing short of devastating.
The cuts to Birmingham Council affect everything. Every single penny that the council spends is being reviewed by government commissioners, to the point where the grass couldn't be mowed in the parks because they'd run out of diesel and the commissioners hadn't signed it off.
We're making the kinds of cuts that really damage the social fabric of the city. I'm talking about cuts to youth services in a city that has probably one of the youngest populations across Europe.
My concern is these kids that are kids now, right? They're going to grow up into adulthood, but with poverty, with reduction of opportunities. So I feel really sorry for the younger generation. I really, really do.
It affects children's services, children's homes, adult social care. It affects the roads. They've dimmed the streetlights. Every single thing has been cut.
The commissioners argue that these cuts are necessary, given the scale of Birmingham's financial mismanagement.
The role of the Commission is somewhat misunderstood. They've been very clear. Birmingham City Council leadership have got the city into this mess, and it's for them to make the decisions to get the city out of this mess.
However, the scale of Birmingham's problems can't be levied at the council alone.
You cannot look at what's happened here in Birmingham without reflecting on the fact that 14 years of austerity took £1 billion away from this city that wasn't then available to spend and invest in services that people rely on here in Birmingham.
Chancellor George Osborne will begin his campaign to convince the public to back spending cuts later.
Government got too big, spent too much and doubled the national debt.
Nothing is safe from the axe.
Birmingham's not alone in facing financial crises.
It's no coincidence that other councils have found themselves in the position of issuing Section 114 notices, as Birmingham has ended up doing, or also having to make substantial cuts to budgets and cuts to services because of the wider financial challenges they've faced.
The reason for that is the decisions of previous governments to cut spending on local government.
In 2023, the National Audit Office found that almost half of local authorities were at risk of defaulting, largely due to austerity funding cuts.
Now, these were virtually unheard of before the financial cuts of the 2010s. So I think it's clear that it's very unlikely that the whole of local government has suddenly become ineffective at managing finance.
However, viewing the city as just another victim of austerity funding cuts ignores how Birmingham specifically has been targeted.
We inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas. Then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
Between 2011 and 2021, average council funding nationally fell by 26%. In Birmingham, it was 36%. The city's population growth has made this figure even more profound, with funding per capita falling by a staggering 40.8%. According to the Audit Reform Lab at the University of Sheffield, this was the largest decline of any large city, county or borough council.
We had the choice of do we cut councils that are poorer or deprived areas the same as richer areas, or the government decided to cut poorer and more deprived areas more.
I think the problems that Birmingham faces is obviously clearly its lack of funding.
We have lost substantial amounts of funding.
Only one councillor that we talked to rejected the role of austerity altogether.
So it's important to note, and it's incredibly frustrating, that cuts to Birmingham's budget centrally have nothing to do with Birmingham's crisis. It is entirely self-caused.
However, whilst only the Conservatives rejected the role of austerity, every councillor agreed on another factor.
We've had problems of both lack of funding to a big council that needed a lot of funding, and also, mismanagement.
The Labour government running our city down the drain.
Specific issues here in Birmingham, which we've been working really hard to address under my leadership over the last 2 years.
It's undoubtedly true that many, many local authorities are finding themselves in great difficulties and effectively bankrupt. But I'd say that Birmingham has got some particular problems, which are largely homegrown.
It's hard to pin Birmingham's bankruptcy on just one mistake by the council.
So Oracle, which is the IT programme, budgeted for 19 million, it's now well over 150, 190 million pounds and still not working. Secondly, in terms of its own internal budget overspend, they invariably overspent in 2023, 24, 24, 25. And the third is the equal pay crisis.
One of the main problems why we're in this predicament is because of equal pay claims.
As much as there's any single cause, it would have to be this equal pay claim. The equal pay claim was the only cause of bankruptcy referred to in the Section 114 notice issued by the council, and subsequent reports by the commissioners found that this liability was systematically ignored for years.
Equal pay liability, which was known in 2012 and it was settled, the underlying contractual issues was not resolved. And that's crucial because then the very next day, a new equal pay liability rolled on.
Council had legal advice, we were told by the former deputy leader, not to do it. They did it anyway. So now the council's being sued.
And now, of course, it's rolled on to 2024-25. This liability has continued to grow. So it has been ignored. And again, this has nothing to do with budget cuts.
I've been very clear that there were certain specific issues that were Birmingham's responsibility to address and fix. So challenges around equal pay, for instance.
It's important to note that the current leader, Councillor John Cotton, was involved in the cabinet. He was on equal pay boards. He was very much aware of the equal pay situation. And I strongly believe that either the leader knew about the situation and failed to do anything about it, in which case he's negligent, or he didn't know about it and he was responsible for it, in which case he is then incompetent.
Media coverage of Birmingham Council's crisis have been dominated by this equal pay liability, and it's understandable why. However, although making for good headlines, this £760 million figure, in the words of the head commissioner, was not a real number.
They said that they had a potential £760 million bill for that.
The 760 million figure came, we believe, from the council leader. He said it in a council meeting.
There is some confusion about the actual pay liabilities.
One of the issues there is that it wasn't entirely clear what that liability was, and yet we've been making substantial cuts to services in Birmingham on the basis that the higher figure of 760 million was the correct figure.
We needn't have made quite so many cuts as we have, but then we still don't know how much it'll be.
What is the real number? Well, no one actually knows. Estimates range from £121 million to 425 to 867.
And in part, this is understandable because you don't really know until you've reached an agreement, what correction you're going to make to the way that your pay policy operated. But I think the scale of the change in estimates is quite remarkable.
How can there be this much uncertainty? Well, the fact that Birmingham hasn't had a functioning IT system for several years hasn't exactly helped. The council's new IT system was supposed to be a symbol of the city's renewal, improving efficiency and cutting costs. Originally estimated at £19 million, the Oracle system has ended up costing £171 million. That is, it will cost that when it works, which optimistic reports estimate will be another year at the earliest and another £45 million.
But the problem with Oracle is more than that. It's meant not only that there's been a massive cost overrun, but it's meant that the local authority in the last 3 years has not been able to get a grip of where its actual finances were.
The first Commissioner report in early 2024 stated that reliance could not be placed on the most basic of financial information. The effects of this have gone far beyond equal pay.
Some of the schools weren't being paid, some of the schools were being paid double. Birmingham City Council's not taking a responsibility with that due to Oracle.
We've, as a city, lost 150 million in business rates because they weren't billed.
External audits found that the failed Oracle system represented a broader pattern of mismanagement and optimism bias. The council continuously executed ambitious projects with no clear sense of purpose and often even lacked the technical ability to carry them out. When we sat down with the opposition, most seemed to blame bad individuals in the council. But if this is the case, why is it that after so many leadership changes, Birmingham Council keeps on making mistakes?
If the cuts hadn't have happened, would the mismanagement have happened? I don't know.
Even poor decision making by the council is linked to austerity.
Funding is a huge problem. I think as well, Birmingham, it's so big.
As frequently noted by the media, Birmingham is the largest local authority in Europe, which is pretty odd given that it's the 26th largest city. Whilst Greater Manchester is split into 10 councils and London 32, Birmingham only has 1. Even before austerity, Birmingham had to manage everything from allotments to urban regeneration for over 1.1 million people. Its size, coupled with austerity cuts, have created a bureaucratic nightmare.
I'm spending much of my time, it seems to be troubleshooting, chasing answers, not getting answers, chasing people who've already got large workloads, who don't know the area, don't know the problem, having to explain to them, having to go and find out other, trying to end up doing the work that really should have been done definitely not by a councillor probably. And as a councillor, I find that quite difficult because I want to make things better, but I'm spending all my time just sort of keeping things ticking over, as it were.
However, even in the context of austerity, some of the actions of the council are indefensible. Before Birmingham's bankruptcy, conflict in the council was endemic.
In Birmingham, a very significant problem over the last kind of few years has been the lack of consistency in the very top management.
A 2023 CIB report into the council Labour group discovered a dysfunctional climate defined by personality-driven factionalism.
They've got a big majority. They can do whatever they want. There's no challenge to them.
Unfortunately, sometimes there's decision makers that just want to make decisions off their own back and not listen to what others are suggesting. Half of them don't even listen to the debates. They walk out of the chambers and then come back and vote against it. Because they hold the majority, they win overall.
Labour have controlled the council since 2012, when voters used the local elections to make their voices heard against the austerity of the central government in Westminster.
Some of these numbers are incredible.
Labour has never ever won Sutton Coldfield in the entire history of elections in Sutton Coldfield.
The vote today has not been about what we've done in Birmingham. I'm very proud of what we've done in Birmingham, but the verdict of the voters is the national scene and we've had to pay for it.
For 13 years, Labour have dominated the council, consistently holding between twice and triple the councillors of the next largest party.
Everybody gets tired. You look at government and they're full of bright ideas and energy at the beginning and just seem tired and sick of it by the end. You do need to change from time to time. If you're fighting for every vote, you're making sure that you're doing the right thing all the time. So it's perhaps a bit of complacency due to a big majority. But that won't be the case next time. The next election is going to be very closely followed.
With the scale of Birmingham's problems, many in the opposition see the council elections next May as their first chance to regain control of the council since the 2000s.
We need a change of leadership in the council, and that's not going to happen until this time next year when we have elections.
Next year is going to be very interesting, and a lot of people will have a chance to have their vote and vote for the right reasons.
However, the current opposition was surprisingly pessimistic. Currently, the Lib Dems, Conservatives and Labour control 92% of the council, with the next largest party, the Greens, at only 2 seats. As British politics fragmentates, however, a return to the Lib Dem Conservative coalition of the 2000s looks unlikely.
Everybody I've spoken to seems to think that Labour are going to lose a lot of seats, and to everyone else. So the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, Reform, the Greens. And we could be in a place where no one has a majority, but no two parties can form a coalition. And I don't see how you can run a council with a minority. It could be a very difficult time. It could be very interesting for political watchers, but for anyone who has to try and run the city, the next year is going to be a nightmare.
But getting into power will only be their first problem.
Even though they do get held to account by not being re-elected, the financial problem is still there.
It needs someone to accept that you've got to do something to fix the problem. It will hurt, but unless you do it, it will get worse.
I know it sounds extremely depressing, but this is what's actually going on.
There are no easy solutions to Birmingham's problems, say the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. That is, they say, except for one.
But however, if we outsourced the waste, and that's something I know our group would want to look at, that's a big chunk of money we can save. This will reduce the financial implications. And now look at our city. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. If they outsourced it like other boroughs, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Since the strike began, the Labour Council have temporarily outsourced waste collection. The Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives want to make this permanent. They argue that this would allow Birmingham to pay bin strikers more, whilst not breaking equal pay law. At the same time, they say, it would prevent cuts in services.
The current bin strike is because the council cannot pay people who empty bins a different wage from anyone else whose work is deemed to be equal. But that wouldn't apply if we outsourced the bins, if we contracted the bins out to an independent company.
So if they outsource the waste, just like other boroughs, there wouldn't be no strikes, there wouldn't be no equal pay claims.
Although bin collection would remain a council service, unionised workers would be replaced by private bin collectors.
But the current Labour Party won't do that for ideological reasons. They don't want to privatise, they want to nationalise everything.
This is what we've been campaigning for a long time, but it's going on deaf ears.
When we talked to locals, most seemed unsympathetic to the council's handling of the crisis. However, most people also opposed the privatisation of waste collection.
I mean, I don't like it, but I see that it needs to be done. Labour don't like it and are refusing to do it, and we're being sued as a result.
But with no immediate end to the strikes in sight, coupled with the risk of further cuts and tax rises, minds may change by next May. However, the council leadership still think that they can turn things around before the elections next May.
Yeah, I think there are things to be optimistic about. I think the latest funding settlement from central government to local government does a number of very positive things. For instance, it increased the amount, so that's always helpful. It's reintroduced needs-based formulae, so in other words, the areas that need more money are given more money.
We've seen things like the recovery grants, which has addressed some of the historic injustices in the underfunding of big urban areas like Birmingham in comparison to other authorities in other parts of the country. So we've seen a significant boost to our spending power as a result of that finance settlement.
2 years ago, in a bid to end council factionalism, the National Labour Party broke with convention to directly appoint John Cotton leader of the council. However, 3 months into this new beginning, the council was bankrupt. Despite not being council leader when most mistakes were made, John Cotton, rather than his predecessors, has been the face of Birmingham's bankruptcy. But whilst Cotton has been forced to oversee a relentless decline in his first 2 years in office, things might be changing.
We've made great strides now towards eliminating a 300 million deficit in the budget and bringing us back to a stable financial position, tackling that challenge over equal pay, and also tackling the improvement of services, because fundamentally what we need are good quality services that serve every community in the city. We're doing all that service transformation work as well. That's absolutely fundamental. I have to say, all of that work has been recognised, I think, by commissioners and by government.
After years of phony optimism and declining services, it's hard for many to be hopeful for times ahead. But as the rule of the commissioners ends, next May, Birmingham, not Westminster, will choose the city's future.
Melody, hunting me